So the final episode of Willow is here, and it was everything I needed it to be. It was fun. It was exciting. I cried a little bit towards the end. It was just a great way to wrap up the season in a way that is not only satisfactory for a single season, but also leaves the door open for a season two if they decide that they are going to come back. If Lucasfilms and Disney Plus allow them the opportunity. But in the meantime, we're going to dive into Chapter 8, The Children of the Wyrm. If you haven't watched the episode yet, don't go any further. This is your warning. I don't do spoiler free. So make sure you go watch the episode first, and then we can discuss. But in the meantime, if you've watched it, and this is your first time here, like, subscribe, hit that bell icon, drop a super thanks, join as a member of the channel to support. More ways at the end. But in the meantime, we're going to get into my show notes here for Chapter 8, Children of the Wyrm. So we start off, and Arik has been converted, right? So we have in front of Jade and Kit, we have creepy Arik, and behind them we have the crone's lackeys. We see the harpy creature, that sorcerer person, and the uh, the troll guy. He's not a troll, sorry, because the trolls are different in this universe. But that big dude, you know what I'm talking about, the cage on his head. So we have some quirky little dialogue here that the adult me cringed at a little bit, but the inner child in me was like, "Yay!" Especially when Elora turns around and she's like, "You're doing really good," to Kit. I thought that was a cute little thing to do. So I guess we get confirmation here that the princess was the crone. There's a part of me that still isn't quite sure because on the one hand, the princess looks like the princess when she wants to be, but then when she finally converts over to the crone, okay, so was the princess the crone the whole time and she became the crone because she was tired of the rules of Kashmir? Or did the crone convert her into the Harbinger of Death by, from the previous Harbinger? I don't know. There's some ambiguity here, especially towards the end of the episode, and we're jumping ahead just slightly here, when the crone breathes herself, or when the princess breathes herself into Arik, and we have that brief moment where Arik is converted, um, and she's saying, "Now you're the harbinger of death." It put ambiguity into my mind because I'm like, wait a second, if Arik could become, and the princess was, and then this, that, and the other. What does that mean? Does that mean she was the first crone? I don't know. I really don't know anything at this point. Although I have some suspicions, which we'll talk about at the very end. Because even though this is, a spoiler heavy, I still got to do this somewhat in continuity with the episode. So let's go back to the edge of the world. And Willow's giving this speech about that perhaps the two girls were meant to go alone. Perhaps that's prophecy. But Jade gives him this epic speech on love and mentions that this is the beginning of a war and they can't be left alone, which also points to a potential season two tie in. There are three different tie ins. Um, there's three different tie-ins here in my mind. This is one of them. So again, continuity. We got to get back to it. So um, ultimately, we do get the confirmation here of Mad Mardigan's fate, and Willow says this is why he chose to fight the worm from within, because he had to leave the responsibility of protecting the world to those without, as Allagash said. So maybe that's what this is meant to be, but they ultimately decide that they need to help Elora. And Willow gives this really cool speech to Graydon about how you're on your way to being a great sorcerer and an even greater man, right as he jumps off the waterfall. And the prince is like, we'll see each other again, which was an epic send-off. And it was really just kind of a cool little moment that I really appreciated. But I love this moment where Boorman is left alone with Willow. And he's like, looks like it's just us, Willie. And they're talking about Boorman's contemplating what they're going to do on the journey home, visiting whorehouses and everything else. And then he's like, and he has this moment where he's like, maybe I should do something for other people for a change instead of just for myself. And ultimately, he chooses his friends and jumps off the end. But Willow can't. Willow wants to go home to Mem, and so he's torn, but he does walk away into the mists and leave the group to their fate. Um, in any case, the next scene is boom, we get to see the crone, which is the princess, and Arik is obviously hook, line, and sinker turned. She announces herself as the harbinger of the worm. Boorman catches up with the group with Jade and Graydon, and they get this view of the city, and there's this big storm rolling in here. And he gives, there's so much humor in this episode. He's like, if either of you want to make out right now, I'm up for it. And it's like his end of the world speech is just, it's quite amusing. And then the whole scene about how do we hide ourselves from them? Camouflage. He covers himself in sand. There's a lot of fun here. We do then get into a classic fantasy trope of the Vision, which is this, the evil is giving them an illusion, this vision of what could be, tricking them with the mind. I mean, we saw this at the end of Rings of Power. We've seen this at the end of so many shows and films. The bad guy, the evil magic is trying to use an illusion to convince the good guys, join me in the Garden of Eden. It's all going to be perfect. Um, Meanwhile, Graydon's attempting to open the door as the stone hits, and Boorman turns to stone in the dust, which was like this moment where I went, "Are they really going to do like a George R. R. Martin and you know kill off characters at the end of the show?" I'm surprised. Um, Everything's about drinking the juice, right, in the Vision. And then Kit hears her dad's voice guiding her from beyond, and he gives her this great speech. And I really like the way they blended the music from the original film here as he's giving his speech from beyond, because you get this dun 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 dun, but in a very different way. But I like having that theme song of Mad Mardigan as he's giving his speech, but really slowed down, kind of coming from beyond, ethereal, and it snaps Kit out of the illusion. But we find out that Elora apparently chose poorly, because the minions of the Wyrm are rising all over the city. Kit turns to stone, and we're back to Elora Danan in the illusion, and she's having a wedding with um, Prince Arik. And right as they go to kiss, you see the magic flowing from her into Arik, and it severs the connection. And she's like, um, you know, I don't think I'm that into you anymore. And I kind of chuckled. And then we get the big bad guy speech from the crone, which again is that's cliched and tropey, but that's okay. And then right as you think things are about to get really bad, boom, here's Willow. And you knew he was coming back. You knew he wasn't going to abandon his friends. And he's there shouting her name and her titles, and you, lady, are in big trouble. And there's where we get the big end fight. And it is a big fight. There's lots of back and forth here. Elora gets knocked out of the Vision. Everyone comes back from being turned to stone. Yay, nobody dies. Well, technically, maybe. And we finally see the real crone. And this is where I have questions, because I'm like, is this really the princess, or is this what's inhabiting the princess? I think we got our answer at the end of the end of the end of the episode. We'll get to that, but I'm still in the continuity question. Um, Graydon tries to stop her and fails. The crone snaps the wand. This is a pretty cool sequence where she picks the wand and gives this speech to Elora Dana about how desire is so important, and how he just ached with desire to save you and he couldn't do it. And she snaps the wand and flicks Graydon into the void, and we see the remnants of the Wyrm stretching out into like infinity with all of her armies and everything else. And Elora, this is her moment of going, "Oh no, that can't come to pass." And Boorman, as this is going on, Boorman gives the armor to Kit and says, "You're the one who's going to get us out of this. Go save the world." To say, and all this other stuff. But then he gives his speech, which I had to chuckle about, because he basically is going to go defend against the monsters while they're doing their thing. And he's like, "I'm going to go out of this world the same way I went into it, butt naked and kicking ass." And then he jumps into the fray. And he's like, "All right, boys, who brought butter?" And I just thought that was a really, really, really funny thing. So Boorman jumps into the fray, and then we get this epic shot of the whole city lit up as the armies of darkness are coming out of the ground. Willow's blasting fools left and right with his staff. Arik claims he's king over Jade and Kit. They have a great sword fight. Willow's giving Elora a speech in her head, and this is where I'm not going to lie, I cried a little bit. The speech that Willow gave to Elora made me very emotional at whatever time it was, 4:30 this morning that I watched this, and I was like, "Yep, that's the speech we needed to hear." Um, and this is where Elora really starts kicking ass, and the crone feels pain for the first time in cycles, rises up to phase 2 of the boss fight, and this is the big blowout of the show. Elora kicks the crone's ass, but then she brings Arik down for a final kiss and blows herself into his body, which is where I had questions, because this is where I'm like, So if she could transfer herself into Arik, and now Arik's the harbinger of death, was she the harbinger from someone else, or is she the first harbinger? I don't know. Um, so that happens. Um, Kit turns the armor on. It works, and now it covers her in this entire suit of really badass looking armor, which is really cool. And she's got her dad's sword. And Arik turns around. And he's got this twisted visage because now he's the harbinger of death. Um, and there is the end fight, and ultimately they draw the poison out of Arik, and they're kind of there's this scene where it's like an Indiana Jones and the Holy Grail scene where they're off into the distance, Last Crusade, sorry, and um, into the sunset, but Laura's looking back over her shoulders, and Willow is talking about how, yeah, they're all talking about how the Wyrm is still down there, and we've really pissed it off. It's going to come for us, but now more sorcerers will come. So that's leading into a potential season 2. But then we get the actual confirmation of if they decided to pursue this to season 2. Here's the big thing. We see Graydon waking up in a body of corpses on the other side, and he's obviously still alive, but he sees Elora Danon. So we know that this is just an illusion because we know what Kit and Elora went through, but he doesn't know that. And unlike the others who had their friends to help them break free of that illusion, he's alone. And here's the woman that he loves, right? Telling him, "Come, join me. We're at the end of all things, the beginning of things, the next age of this world, my age, but I can't do it alone. I need your help. You will sit at the head of all tables." And here we get the Money for Nothing track from Dire Straits starting to fade in. And Graydon falls hook, line, and sinker as the camera pans up and we see beyond the Harbinger. We see beyond Elora, who is the crone at this point, or at least this is the illusion that he's seen, which leads me to believe that maybe the crone is this the crone or is this the Wyrm speaking to Graydon? Because I think it's the Wyrm speaking to Graydon, but this is the confirmation part that I wanted to talk about. This is again the third season 3 drip. Anyway, Graydon falls for this hook, line, and sinker. The camera pans up. We see the army stretching into the distance beyond the visage of Elora Danon. And then it goes to credits, and we've got, the Dire Straits song playing in the background. So I gotta say, like, the end of this episode, this was another. I said originally that episode 3 was my favorite episode of the season. That is no longer the case. This season finale takes the cake. I enjoyed the whole ride through. I gave most of the episodes like a 10 out of 10 for me. It was just pure enjoyment. There was a couple I was like 8 out of 10 because they did a couple of things that were kind of weird. But this episode for me was firing on all cylinders. Happy to give this like an 11 out of 10. And I don't care about the haters. Let your inner child free, everybody. Don't smother it. Let it free. Let it enjoy simple things in life. And for me, this was a great simple pleasure. Popcorn fare. I had a lot of fun with this. They did some good world building in the show overall. We expanded upon the world that we came to see in the film from the 80s when we were most of us were in our single digits. Um, I don't know. For me, it was great. It was a perfect send off. It leaves, an opening to season 2, but also neatly wraps up season 1 in a bow. And from there, who knows where this is going to go? But I got enjoyment out of season 1. Very, very pleased with this finale. I got to say, kudos to Kasdan and the entire staff of writers and everybody on this team, all the actors and everything else, for putting out something that was highly enjoyable. I hope it gets a season 2 renewal. Thanks everybody for tuning in. If you liked this, don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the bell icon, talk about the episode in the comments below, join as a member, drop a super chat, super thanks, whatever you can do, Patreon page. See you in the next episode. Don't forget Bad Batch coming later today and more as we continue our shows here on YouTube.